Good morning to you all. In the last session, we discussed about the initial and current understanding of biosafety, the release of guidelines, the Blue Book in the year 1986 for recombinant DNA safety considerations, and we also discussed the principles of biosafety and structure of risk analysis. In today's session, we will be discussing few more concepts of biosafety and bioethics. As we discussed earlier, the risk of exposure to biohazardous agent or material, it varies at different levels in laboratory conditions. Depending upon the level of risks associated with the harmful material, the biosafety levels are decided. If you just look at the different levels of biosafety, the intensity of color has increased from biosafety level 1 up to biosafety level 4. So we'll try to understand why there is an increase in the intensity of the color in the coming slides. So the biosafety levels are classified as biosafety level 1, 2, 3 and 4, ranging from low to high. If you just look at this slide, I request you to carefully go through the slide. The World Health Organization recommended the classification of biosafety levels based upon the risks and route of transmission of the pathogenic agents in a laboratory environment. Right? That means the levels of biosafety requirement is dependent upon the level of risk and the route of transmission of the pathogenic agent in a laboratory condition or environment. With this in our mind, the first column indicates the risk groups. Now the risk groups are classified as risk group 1, risk group 2, risk group 3 and risk group 4. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the levels, that is biosafety levels requirement for each of the risk group. What is the biosafety level required in a laboratory environment for each risk group, that is risk group 1 to risk group 4. If an individual or group of people are handling microorganisms, several factors are taken into account. The first factor is dependent upon the properties of the microorganisms. Taking into consideration the properties of the microorganisms, we'll just move on to the second column of this table, that is risk group 1. What properties of microorganisms are classified as risk group 1? Microorganisms not causing any disease, they are placed under group 1. No history of diseases in healthy adult humans because of the microorganisms, they are also placed under group 1, that is risk group 1. Now what is the requirement of the biosafety level in laboratory environment? That is biosafety level 1 abbreviated as BSL-1. Okay. Moving to the third column of the table. It is the same property of the microorganism in consideration. The first property is disease causing microorganisms. They are placed under group 2. And low pathogenicity shown by the microorganisms. What are all the properties of microorganisms placed under group 2? That is what we are trying to understand. Disease causing microorganism, low pathogenesis of the microorganisms. Even if the microorganisms cause disease, disease is not very serious, and preventive measures are available or present for controlling the pathogenicity of the microorganisms. So all these properties of the microorganisms are placed under risk group 2. The biosafety level requirement is BSL-2. That means what kind of safety precautions need to be taken while handling microorganisms showing such properties. Okay, the biosafety level requirement means what is the level of safety measures that has to be adopted or taken into consideration when working with risk group 2 microorganisms. Moving further, under risk group 3, what are the properties of microorganisms are considered? Number 1, virulent strains. Number 2, the pathogen causes severe disease. Number 3, the disease is aggressive. Number 4, therapeutic intervention is feasible. Number 5, the worker is at high individual risk. So the number of properties of microorganisms considered under risk group 3 is increased compared to the risk group 1 and risk group 2. Virulent strains, the pathogen causes severe disease, and if it requires therapeutic intervention which is feasible, and the disease caused by the virulent strain is aggressive, and if the worker is at high individual risk. So all these properties of microorganisms are placed under risk group 3. Then what is the biosafety level requirement? It is BSL-3 or BSL-4. That depends upon the virulent strains, whether it should be BSL-3 or BSL-4. It depends upon the virulent strains and what is the aggressive nature of the disease, what is the level of risk an individual is being exposed. So all these properties decide whether the requirement is BSL-3 or BSL-4. What are the properties of microorganisms considered and placed in risk group 4? Highly virulent strain causes serious disease which may be lethal, difficult to manage by therapeutic intervention, vaccine not available. You people are familiar with this terminology because of the pandemic. Vaccine not available. Now you can understand where the risk group is. The pathogen poses high individual and community risk. Here the quoted example is Ebola virus. Now we can include the coronavirus. The properties are highly virulent strain, causes serious disease which may be lethal, difficult to manage by therapeutic intervention, vaccine not available, the pathogen poses high individual and community risk. So all these properties of microorganisms are placed under risk group 4. Now what is the level of biosafety level requirement? Always recommended to use BSL 4. That means the safety precautions are at most. There should not be any room for the pathogen to cause any infection for the individual or a group of people working in a laboratory environment. Right? So this is about properties of microorganisms. It doesn't end there. Second factor is pathogenicity and infectivity. In the previous slide we discussed about properties. Now we are taking into consideration the pathogenicity and infectivity. With respect to pathogenicity and infectivity, the properties considered under risk group 1 are: it possesses minimal individual or community risk. That is the number 1 property with respect to pathogenicity and infectivity, that is minimal individual or community risk. Microorganisms does not cause disease in humans and animals. Then the requirement of biosafety level is BSL 1. Minimal individual and community risk, again considered to be placed under group 2, is capable of causing disease without serious symptoms. So you can see the onset of the disease but without serious symptoms. Sometimes may lead to serious infection but manageable by treatment. Even if it is serious, if the infection is serious, it is manageable by the treatment. That means treatment is available. So these properties with respect to pathogenicity and infectivity, they are placed under risk group 2. The requirement of biosafety level is BSL 2. High individual risk. Pathogen capable of causing serious infection in humans or animals are placed under risk group 3. The biosafety level requirement is BSL 3 or BSL 4. It possesses high individual and community risk, highly contagious infection, causes serious infection in humans and as well as animals. Then all these properties are placed under risk group 4 The requirement of biosafety level is BSL 4. Always it is BSL 4. So we discussed about properties of the microorganisms and what properties of the microorganisms constitute risk group 1, 2, 4. And now we discussed about the pathogenicity and infectivity of the agents and what properties of pathogenicity and infectivity is placed in group 1 to group 4. And finally, it is about preventability and treatment. This is also an important factor. Based on preventability and treatment, the properties are classified as group 1 to group 4. Preventive and therapeutic measures are available but usually not required. This is an important factor. There is a preventive and therapeutic measure available but usually not required. So this property is placed under group 1. The requirement of biosafety level is BSL 1. Even if you have preventive and therapeutic measures available, but it is usually not required. Second thing is preventive measures available and the spread of infection is limited. There is a preventive measure available and also the spread of infection is limited. It is not spreading so much to a larger community or larger people or large group of people. It is limited. Then the biosafety level requirement is BSL 2 for this risk group 2. Under risk group 3, effective therapeutic interventions are available and preventive measures are also available. But it has to be used, it has to be employed. They are the risk group 3 and the biosafety level requirement is BSL 3 or BSL 4. In the risk group 4, effective therapeutic interventions not available. Effective preventive measures not available. That means therapeutic interventions are not available, preventive measures are not available, then the requirement of biosafety level is always BSL 4. To sum up, the levels of risk is dependent upon the three important factors as we discussed: properties of microorganisms, pathogenicity and infectivity, preventability and treatment. So there are risk group 1, group 2, group 3 and group 4. So the requirement of biosafety levels depend upon these risk groups, that is group 1 to group 4. Clear? This is the classification given by the WHO. So I believe I have made it very clear about the risk groups, the requirement of the biosafety levels for each of the properties associated with these risk groups. Moving further, every scientific revolution we see brings with it a host of ethical and social questions. Any scientific revolution you name, it is associated with ethical and social questions. Even the so-called genetics revolution is no exception. There is a lot of international debate on how the undoubted benefits in progress in this area can be restored or reconciled with certain core human values. how to take up the scientific investigations or research considering the certain core human values. So this constitutes something called as bioethics. So biotechnology is always in hand with bioethics, right? The present day biotechnology has opened up many opportunities in R&D. I have given few of them where the R&D of the present day biotechnology is addressing. It's a list, very few list. Improving human health conditions, number 1. Number 2, food and feed problems. Number 3, medicine and agriculture. I believe it covers almost all. Number 4, it has tremendously affected the thought process, like consuming vegetables and fruits without pesticides but by using biofertilizers, and use of renewable sources of energy, and so on. I have handpicked only few issues addressed by the present day biotechnology R&D. All these issues host a lot of ethical concerns, right? These developments is made possible with the techniques which involves gene manipulation. Now the gene manipulation happens in many life forms: plants, animals, microbes. Since the techniques involve gene manipulation in plants, animals, microbes, ethical issues give rise to bioethics. Since the life forms are involved, since the life forms are being manipulated using the biotechnological tools or methods, and whatever the advancement we see today, all these advancements, they are the concerns in the form of ethical issues, which is giving rise to bioethics, right? When we speak about bioethics, two important codes are always discussed. Number 1, Nuremberg Code of 1947. It is the ethical guidelines for biomedical research. How did the code came into force? This code surfaced in the response. That means this code was developed against the response of human rights abuses that had taken place under the Nazis during the World War II. So what happened during the World War II? There was severe human right abuses that had taken place under the Nazis. So this code surfaced in response to this. We call it as Nuremberg Code of 1947. What was the abuse? The war captives, they were subject to abuses through experiments on human subjects without any consent, without any formal consent. They were treated as experimental human subjects. This propounded the use of, so what is the outcome of that? That it made mandatory or propounded the use of informed consent. That means individual who is undergoing any trial, any medical trial, any clinical trial, he or she should give the consent. That is called as informed consent. Consent for the information provided to the subject, that is he or she, right? Then use of non-maleficence. Non-maleficence is the act done to avoid any harm to the human subject. Then the use of, propounded the use of beneficence. It is related to kindness. Then justice, whether the treatment being given is genuine or fake. And autonomy, independency. Nuremberg Code of 1947 propounded the use of informed consent, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice and autonomy. So these provided normative framework used by the researcher and medical practitioners. Right? To elaborate a little more on the Nuremberg Code, number 1, voluntary human consent is essential. Without this, no clinical trial can be conducted. Experimental results should result in good for the society. Number 3, anticipated results should justify the experiment that is being conducted. Whatever the results you anticipate prior to the experiment, and then after the or end of the experiment, the anticipated results should be justifiable. Number 4, avoid all unnecessary physical and mental suffering. There should be complete physical and mental suffering should be completely avoided. No experiment if there is a chance of death or disability. You cannot carry out any experiment which results in death or disability of the human subject. Minimize risk of subjects. So there should be minimal risks associated with the experiment. Proper preparations and facilities to protect the subject. The subject over here, I mean the human subject. Number 8, experiments conducted only by qualified persons. Most important. Number 9, subjects can withdraw at any time. That is autonomy. You cannot force a subject to be there till the end or completion of the experiment. No, it cannot be done. It is the right of the subject to withdraw at any time during the course of the experiment. Number 10, terminate the experiment if results are known or with best judgment. Never ever carry out an experiment, that is clinical trial, if you already know the results or with better judgment. I have handpicked very few points under the Nuremberg Code. Right? I hope I have made it very clear. So I'll stop here for today's discussion. We can continue our discussion on biosafety and bioethics in the next session. Thank you all.